We're going to read from The Woman I Kept to Myself by Julia Alvarez. Thanks to Phoebe McAdams for recommending Alvarez's poetry to me a while back. Julia Alvarez was born in 1950 in New York City. I quote from the Poetry Foundation. Alvarez moved to the Dominican Republic with her Dominican American parents when she was an infant. In 1960, though, the political situation forced the family to return to New York. Alvarez has explained that the experience of being forced to refine her English upon returning to the United States made her very aware of language. Good training for a writer. In 2013, she received the National Medal of Arts from President Obama, end of quote. Her main themes are ancestry, the languages of Spanish and English, childhood, sisterhood, marriage, love, loss, redemption. She's a personal, compassionate poet. The superb readers in order of appearance are, if Corinne is able to get on, Corinne Conley, Kay Weissman, Helen Richman, me, Harry Northup. So we will begin with Kay Weissman and then Helen Richman and then myself. And when I finish with what was it that I wanted, then Corinne can come in and read her poetry. Here's Kay Weissman.
My bottom line. You are the bottom line, my love, the net that catches me each time I take a leap toward an absolute that isn't there, but appears dispersed in the relative. Warm supper waiting when I get in late. My folded long johns on the laundry stack. The covers on my side turn sweetly down when finally I head upstairs from work that couldn't wait till morning. The love note tucked in my suitcase for my night away. It says the obvious, the old cliches I wouldn't want my friends to know we use for love. And God forbid my enemies should get hold of these endearments so banal. I would lose my readers' trust if someone published them under my name. But still, as I write mine with smiley face and slip it under the pillow on your side, or when I read yours in a hotel room, I feel more moved than by a Rilke poem or a Tolstoy novel or a Shakespeare play. My love grows stronger with the tried and true if it comes from you. More and more as we age and the golden boys peer out of the magazines with their sultry looks and their arched brows, I am so relieved I'm not an ingenue searching for you at parties, singles bars. I have you, waving when my plane gets in, curling your body in the shape of mine. My love, my number one, my bottom line. Love portions. We're always fighting about household chores, but with this twist, we fight to do the work, both wanting to fix dinner, mow the lawn, haul the recycling boxes to the trunk, or wash the dishes when our guests depart. And I don't mean little spats. I mean real fights, bang doors and harsh words over the soap suds. You did it last night. No fair. You shopped. The feast spoils why we argue portions, both so afraid of taking advantage. But love should be unbalanced. A circus clown carrying a tower of cups and saucers who slips on a banana peel and lands with every cup still full of hot coffee. Well, almost every cup. A field of seeds pushing their green hopes through the frozen earth to what might be spring or a spring-like day midwinter. Love ignores neat measures. The waves leave ragged wet marks on the shore. Autumn lights, one more fire in the maples. Tonight you say you're making our dinner, and you won't let me so much as stir the sauce. I march up to my study in a huff. The oven buzzer sounds. The smells waft up of something good I try hard to ignore while I cook up my paper concoction. Finally, you call me down to your chef d'oeuvre, a 3-course meal. I hand you mine, this poem. Briefly, the scales balance between us. Food for the body, nurture for the soul. Fights. Our fights, they last for days. Not the fighting, but that long aftermath when neither one wants to go first over the muddy waters of reconciliation. Waters churned up by fears and jealousies we can't control. Bad weathers of the soul that sweep through us, leaving us both like those grim survivors of natural disasters on TV, recounting nimbly over and over. I never thought. Next thing I knew. All families, all happy families, Leo Tolstoy wrote, are alike. But each unhappy family is unhappy in its own unhappy way. I'd rather be like everybody else, humdrum and glad, tending my happy lot than standing in an open field, littered with what was once our house. The newscaster probing with tactless questions in the hopes we'll break down with our own unique unhappiness before the camera. Days after, we're still feeling the effects. Lights aren't back yet. The road's impossible. The world mined with betrayals left and right. Meanwhile, in the back rooms of the heart, we count by flickering gas lamp what is left. Not much, when put in piles of yours and mine. Outside, the rivers overflow their banks and thunder through our lives so we can't hear. For all our righteousness, the others cry. Perhaps of reassurance, perhaps goodbye. Tone. I hear my husband on the phone downstairs. Not the exact words, just a certain tone that's wafting upstairs. And right off, I know he's talking to his mother by the way his voice relaxes, spreads like soft butter on fresh bread. And when he's done, I hurry down as if to get a taste of him still warm with motherly love. So different from the tone, if tightened purse strings, when his ex-wife calls. I stay upstairs, not wanting to be pulled in. Or his daughters call, and his voice skips stones across the pond of longing that wells up after a week of not speaking with them. From bed, I hear him sweet talking the cat. No words, just the same coaxing murmuring he's humming in my ear when we make love. Me and the cats. I could be doing worse. Or the clipped tone he uses to cut off a telemarketer at supper time, or a request to fund a dubious cause. Or the military, yes, sir, no, sir tone with which he passes information on to people he dislikes. Finally, the oh so charming tone he dotes on my mother, as if he has to prove himself worthy to marry me. But we're already wed, flesh and bone. So all I have to hear is the vibration of his voice downstairs. And instantly, I know what he's feeling. as if I felt the same feeling myself. Hair bands. My husband has given away my hair bands in my dream to the young woman he works with. My black velvet, my mauve, my patent leather one, the olive band with the magenta rose whose paper petals crumble in the drawer, the flowered crepe, the felt with a rickrack of vines, the twined mock tortoise shells. He says I do not need them. I've cut my hair so it no longer falls in my eyes when I read or when we are making love and I bend over him. But no, I tell him, you do not understand. I want my hair bands, even if I don't need them. These are the trophies of my maidenhood. The satin dress with buttons down the back, the scented box with the scallop photographs. This is my wild-haired girlhood dazzled with stories of love. The romantic heroine with the pale operatic face who throws herself in the train tracks of men's arms. These are the chastened girl shelves I gave up to become the woman who could be married to you. But every once in a while, I pull them out of my dresser drawer and touch them to my cheek. Worn velvet and faded silk. Mi tesoro, mi juventud. Worn velvet and faded silk, which my husband has passed on to the young woman who holds for him the promise of who I was. And in my dream, I weep real tears that wake me up to my husband sleeping beside me, that deep sleep that makes me tremble thinking of what is coming. And I slip out of bed to check they are still mine. My crumbled rose, my mauve, my black hair bands. Manholes. I love to see men coming out of holes. Manholes and sewer drains and train tunnels, or down the poles of firehouses, the gong going like crazy, a dozen heroes in the making. Through the bedroom window comes the house painter to touch up my sills. A college boy, naked from the waist up, who talks of Nietzsche between drying coats, or hauled up from my well, the dowser calls, "There's water," as he drabs his sweaty face. I'm known to gawk at men in overalls, jackhamming themselves into the earth, then rising out of rubble like the dead, or the bell-ringing priest pulling the ropes and then descending through the steeple trapdoor, one of God's discard angels without wings. Perhaps it's their fragility I love. That moment when they're caught in no man's land, plummeting through the dark, then coming back smiling, unscathed with their hard hats still on. No time to think of conquest, empires, women, the makes of cars, the best in mutual funds, who won the Super Bowl. No, they're knee deep or more in circumstance. The main line broke. There's trouble in the bowels of the earth that needs urgent fixing. And when they emerge, shaken by what they've seen, tears in their eyes at disasters and deaths averted, that's when I love them the most. When they remind me of that moment when their mothers gave them life.
Cannons. Preparing for the Pico Duarte climb, with only one half of a packing mule allotted to personal belongings, I had to choose between Bishop and Frost. Frost would be perfect for the dialogue I planned to have with nature, but Bishop was addressing a similar landscape in her Brazil poems. I weighed back and forth, considering leaving a second pair of hiking shoes or my long underwear. Finally, I hate to say it, but I chose solely in terms of weight. The paperback Frost was lighter, smaller than Bishop, and would fit in my jacket pocket if the mule got tired and had to be relieved. This choice led me to think of how canons are formed, how books are chosen as the texts to be carried down the generations. Why Pound and not HD? And why, oh, why Sir so-and-so and not more Sor Juana? I'd like to think the basis for the choice was on some better principle than mine, but who knows? Especially when I peruse my old Norton anthologies and note the shameful absence of certain voices. I wonder if they never existed or if they were knocked out of the running for some silliness like the writer's sex. Perhaps those who selected were like me, who let an ass choose my mountain canon. Ars Politica. I was the daughter who changed overnight from clingy, thumb in her mouth, a problem child, always afraid and needing to be soothed, to feisty elbows out, watch out for her. What happened, so the family story goes, was that I picked up reading and began to make things up, to take the hurricane out of the wind, bring back the disappeared, replace the shanty shacks with palaces, and turn the beggars loose on my vegetables. I yearned to write the story of my life into a book a girl might want to read, a girl like me, no longer frightened by the whisperings of terrified adults, the cries of uncles being rounded up, the sirens of the death squads racing by toward a destination I could change with an eraser or a trick ending. There had to be a way to make the world safer so I could bear to live in it. This might not be the destiny of art, to save the uncles, free the prisoners with a twist of plot, but it's a start. If Wordsworth had it right, and the child is father of the man, but just a start. The inhumanity of our humanity will not be fixed by metaphor alone. The plot will fail. The tortured will divulge our names, our human story end, unless our art can write what happens in the world. That moment when astronauts disappear behind the moon and all contact with them is lost until they reappear again, or when firemen enter the burning building and flames leap out of the hole they entered, or during wartime, as the train pulls out of the station, a desperate hand waves from the window, a voice calls out a name, a voice the named one never hears again, or when your child merges with a crowd. Those everlasting separations from the people you love, the places you love, to which you were intending to return. But the moment passes, the train arrives, you enter a new country, fall in love, marry, and build a house with postcard views of snow-capped mountains, babbling brooks you never knew would feel so good. But as you look out, savoring the scene, a chain of other mountains rises up. A ghostly face composes in the clouds, a loss you never thought you would survive. But here you are, far stronger, more at home and happier than you ever were before. those hard moments that take your breath away and literally will do so at the end, pile up like casualties and treasures, both. Hold on tight could be the first commandment for this life. And the second, let it go. Only the empty hand is free to hold. Grandbaby. My husband says, why don't you write a poem about the new baby? You're the writer in the family. Birth is a big deal. It deserves a poem, new life, etc. Put in about her being born in spring on International Women's Day. Now there's a theme. I bet most poets write about their kids and grandkids when they're born. You're always scribbling about the past. How about a here and now grandbaby? Tall order, but short notice, honey. I hate to tell you, but babies don't need poetry. We do. We intelligent people, gaga over the crib, which thankfully has a guardrail to keep people like us from crawling inside to recite something appropriate and unnecessary. Silence is the compliment here. Stunned and abashed and joyous silence, a quiet reply to the noisy mysteries of the universe. Hello, Naomi. How you doing, girl? Is the best I can do when I stare down at her tiny, elegant hands and dream a pen, a little baton, a steering wheel in them, trying to match a future life with her astonishing and perfect self. But I've taken her silence as my cue. Naomi doesn't need a word from me. I'm just a writer in the family. I know real poetry when I see it. Lifelines. Words I read years ago keep coming back to calm me at the most opportune times. Helping my parents pack for their return back to their homeland after 40 years, my sadness lifted, murmuring a line from Yeats. This is no country for old men. When my niece told me she was marrying a young man I wish I thought better of, I almost said, but bit my tongue in time, when lovely woman stoops to folly. As Mom lay dying and I saw the light receding from her eyes, the phrase popped up, creeps in this petty pace from day to day. And I felt comforted, as if my grief could be contained within that mournful line. And yet I mourned the deeper for that line. Often I crack, and poetry seals the crack. I've glued many a heartbreak with the phrase, after so many deaths, I live and write, which sets me up to love and lose again. Unlike my Buddhist friends, I've never found solace in silence. Sorry, but I love the way words say what words can't be said in words. We fall, and a brief quatrain breaks our fall. A villanelle recalls us to ourselves. I'm buoyed by poems that spring upon my lips like prayers mothers whisper over cribs. The winds of time would carry me away, but for the words, which when my life breaks down, rise up and clap their hands and louder sing. Regreso. Late in life, Poppy forgets himself and switches from his broken English to his muy elocuente Espanol. My husband glances up at me, flashing his monolingual SOS. What's he saying? Or talking on the phone about his imminent regreso home. After 4 decades living in New York, he starts to roll his R's and sails off into a stream of Spanish consciousness. The family wonders if he should be checked, if he's regressing, if he's showing signs of early Alzheimer's, as he rattles on about his imminent return Por fin me regreso a mi tierra. Ya yo estoy cansado de traducción. But I feel glad that he is speaking in his native tongue. After so many years of struggling to bring all of himself into English and tell the great adventure of his life. Now he gives up mid-sentence, pours his sense into the deeper cistern of his soul, his native tongue, la lengua más bella. So he would tell me when in shame I'd beg that he'd speak English with my teenage friends, or rather, but I didn't dare say this, that he'd keep quiet to avoid their scorn. Now, as your final regreso draws close, cuéntanos, papi, todo en español, all that we lost of you in English. In Spanish. Sometimes it touches me more when I hear a phrase in Spanish rather than English. We're walking in the campo and a friend warns me to steer clear of that thorny bush. Esa enlata hay que respetarla. That plant is one you have to respect. My old niñera answers my compliment that she is looking younger every year. Los años no perdonan a nadie. The years don't forgive anyone, Doña. She calls me Doña, who once ran my world. Proof of her point that time topples us all. But her saying it in Spanish goes deeper and stirs the sediment at the bottom of my heart. So the feeling is stronger, more mixed in with everything else I am, swirling through both the thick and thin of me, leaving nothing unfeeling, which is why I've been accused of overreacting when I change countries and forget myself. Puzzling then that I write in English, as I have to step back from myself to be able to say what I'm feeling. The way sometimes we have to get away from the place we were born or from someone we love in order to know who we are. Yes, yet as I write in English, I murmur the words over in Spanish to be sure I'm writing down the truth of what I feel. Que escribo lo que siento de verdad.
Leaving English. Before leaving English, I cling to words I haven't paid attention to in years. Drindle and trill and sin, until the thought of spending weeks without them is too sad to think about. Come with me, I invite my monolingual husband, so at night you can whisper sweet nothings in my ears against possession by my native tongue. Even if Spanish made me who I was, it's English now that tells me who I am. You talk like an addict, my husband scolds. Language is not a drug. But I get high working a line until I get it right, like finding the last puzzle piece or bulb that lights up the whole string of Christmas lights. My family claims that I've deserted them. One thing is learning English, another to think you're lost without it. Por favor, you left in exile. That was not your fault. This passion is a second desertion. Before leaving, I touched the shelves of books, then closed my study door reluctantly, like a child casting a longing glance at bedtime at her bears and dressed up dolls, posed to enact some simple ritual, a tea party, a classroom scene. Stop. Don't you dare move. But English won't obey. No living language will. When I came back, it will take dias to collect myself. Pieces of me not fitting anywhere. Meditation. Sometimes I'll walk out in a field at night and sit under the stars, breathing in stars, moon, sky reflecting pond, breathing out stars, moon, sky reflecting. Whoa, what was that? A beaver in the pond? And now a flood of other thoughts rush in. Oh, my aching back. So-and-so's email. Oh God, I forgot to pick up garlic. Soon I cannot hear the owls hooting, the leaves rustling back, carried away by today's trivia. Sometimes a busy, grassy place seems best. A shopping mall Saturday afternoon, crowded with warring teenage girls and moms, and little boys out of some matinee practicing their karate kicks and cries. All of that roiling, noisy humanity I carry deep within me, which is why I need to meditate. But sales beckon, shoppers hurry by, the food court fills, and down the spiritual tubes goes my meditation. My first step is always on these lines: a breathless shipwreck crawling up a beach that seems deserted, not a sign of life. But in this emptiness, I find myself and lose myself as lines move in and out, like breathing, like discovering a space, which by turns is a shopping mall, a field, a pond, and all and none of the above. It's hard to call what happens here a name. My poem, my practice, my meditation. Aficionados. I have a friend who tangos and attends meetings in Helsinki. Amazingly, the largest convention of tango lovers in the world, day after chilly day. The couples 1, 2, swoon, 1, 2, and turn across the mirrored ballroom as snows fall beyond the steamed up windows. Just last year, he met a dental hygienist from Maine and fell madly in love. I see him dancing in shiny black shoes and red cummerbund. She in a long, I think required, skirt, a slit revealing vistas never seen in Maine, vistas she surely never sees, peering down throats, her hand on countless cheeks. Another man I know adores Star Trek and meets with other Trekkies once a year. Get him started, and the dinner party is ruined, except for the amusement of seeing him so worked up. Every month I send a dying stamp collecting friend stamps saved from letters sent by island ants, gaudy virgins, miniature dictators, flowers so otherworldly, my friend says he'll soon be seeing native specimens. The man who cuts my hair spends his spare time making doll furniture. Each time I hear of some new passion, I feel gratitude at one more instance of the many ways we learn through what we love to love the world, which might be all that we are here to do. Touching bottom. Sometimes the best advice comes randomly. Please hold through the silence, the machine voice said. The best advice I've ever come across for weathering writer's block. At the restaurant, my friend tasted her buffalo steak and said, "It's not like anything they say it is," which words should be engraved upon my heart and piped into my memory each time that I assume the saying of the world is anything at all like living in it. And yet, I love how words can sound the world, how they can take you deep inside your life. You say something simple, and suddenly that plank in reason breaks and down you drop into a liberating train of thought. You're drinking coffee, talking to a friend, and poetry unravels from her mouth. An Ariadne string that leads you out of that dark labyrinth where a minotaur of your own making has held you in thrall. Keep your hand level. Keep your end level, my husband advised as we built shelves and the high-strung one. I took his words to heart. Take in my give, my mother used to say as we made beds, which words taught me how to conduct myself in future bedrooms with the men I love. My self-made father once said, "We should live like poor men with money." When I thanked him, he said, "For what?" I said, "Because I just touched bottom in my life when you said that." Reading for pleasure. When I read a book I love, I fall in love with the author. I can't help it. The voice, even if centuries old, pierces my heart as if along with every reader, I were being threaded through a needle's eye that's being used to stitch the lot of us into an uncommon humanity of lovers for whom books are love letters, posted to every man, woman, and child, but penned specifically to each of us. How many times haven't I stroked the sheets of my Riverside Shakespeare or pressed my lips to my dog-eared Dickinson? I pine for Keats whenever I read his odes, and I confess I want to be Maud when I reread Yeats. Each time I teach George Herbert, I caress the page on which my favorite poem appears, as if to soothe the weary minister who asks, who'd have thought my shriveled heart could have recovered greenness? I did, George. Perhaps I picked up the desire from them of wanting my readers to fall in love with hairbands, willow trees, lawn ornaments, this odd and wondrous world which would be lost without our recreation. Those who write, but principally those who read for pleasure, breathing life into dead characters. And now, like them, I lie on these cold sheets, wanting to be a woman once again. You who are reading these words, come closer. What was it I wanted? What was it I wanted? I forget. To have a place called home. These quiet hills I look on as I write. The trees I grew as seedlings now full blown and full of birds. Sparrows and thrushes singing as I work. Even the snow beating against the panes. I wanted that. And you, dear one, stopping outside my study door, then going on, that loving pause that longs, but still respects my solitude. I wanted you most of all. I wanted a voice, oh yes, one that would tell simply, but with the mute heart's eloquence, who I was, what my brief time on earth was all about, and more. There were always more. I wanted to be wanted, to belong in school, country, gender, neighborhood. One of the good girls everybody loves, the heroine of the story of my life with a happy ending. I wanted that. Who knows why anymore? But yes, I did. Some things I wanted, but I couldn't get. I wanted not to want my mother's love. That look of urgent cherishing I've glimpsed in the soft eyes of dogs and the dying. I wanted Poppy's love unhinged from Shane, his own and mine. I wanted not to feel that yearning for the child I never had. What else was I wanted? I forget. Or could it be the longing that I want to make me stretch beyond the lot I got?
Family tree. When I was born, my mother wrote me down on the family tree. A second bough dangling from her branch, which was attached to a great trunk, which sunk down into roots sprung from the seeds of Spain and Africa. The latter never mentioned, but expressed by darker faces in the family clan. We were on the up and up. Good hair, light skin, a foreign education for the men, fine weddings for the guaranteed virgins. Branch by branch, blossom by blossom, we grew, our individual trees lost in the woods of Alvarez and Tavares' ancestors. Until by emigration, seeds were cast on foreign lands. A maternal great-aunt married a German, and our name was lost in guttural patronymics, blonde cousins with year-round suntans. My sister and I, transported stateside in the 60s, turned into tangled-haired hippies, slinging our English slang. We clipped ourselves off from the family tree, independent women, or so we thought, until our babies started to be born, sporting Mamita's dimples, Tio's brows, the voice of Tia Mariana, thick and sweet like boiled down sugar cane. The family tree transplanted, but not totally transformed. Even I, the childless one, intend to write New Yorker fiction in the Cheever style. But all my stories tell where I came from. Abbott Academy. Mommy sent me to Abbott, where they tamed wild girls, or so she'd heard, into ladies who knew how to hold their skirts down in a breeze and say, "Excuse me," if compelled to speak. Ladies who married well, had lovely kids, then inexplicably went mad and had gin and tonics or the gardener for breakfast. That part my mother hadn't heard. Ladies who learned to act like blondes, even if they were dark-haired, olive-skinned, spit chicks like me. And so that fall, with everything checked off the master list, 3 tea dresses, 2 pairs of brown Oxfords, white gloves, 4 cardigans, I was deposited at Draper Hall to have my edges rounded off, my roots repotted in the American soil. I bit my nails, cracked my knuckles hard. Habits the handbook turned unladylike. Sins, the nuns called them back at Catholic school. I said my first prayer in months that night. Dios, I begged, help me survive this place. And for the first time in America, he listened. The next day for English class, I was assigned to Miss Ruth Stevenson, who closed the classroom door and said, "Ladies, let's have ourselves a hell of a good time." And we did, reading Austen, Dickinson, Eliot, Woolf, until we understood we'd come to train, not tame, the wild girls into the women who would run the world. By accident. Sometimes I think I became the woman I am by accident. Nothing prepared the way, not a dramatic, wayward aunt or moody mother who read Middlemarch, or godmother who whispered, "You can be whatever you want," and by doing so performed the godlike function of breathing grit into me. Even my own sisters were more concerned with hair dryers and boys than with the poems I recited ad nauseum. In our shared bedrooms, when the lights were out, "You're making me sick," my sisters would say as I ranted on. Whitman's Song of Myself, not the best lullaby, I now admit, or Chaucer in Middle English, which caused many a nightmare fight. "Mammy," they called, "she's doing it again." Slap of slippers in the hall, door clicks, and lights snapped on. "Why can't you be considerate for once?" "I am," I pleaded. "These are sounds, sweet airs that give delight, and—" "Keep it to yourself," my mother said, which more than anything anyone in my childhood advised, turned me to this paper solitude, where I keep things secret and broadcast my heart for all the world to read. And so, through many drafts, I became the woman I kept to myself as I lay awake in that dark bedroom with the lonesome sound of their soft breathing as my sisters slept. Lunch hour, 1971. It was the autumn of my discontent in New York City. I was 21 with nothing to show but a resume of thin successes, sundry summer jobs, a college writing prize, 4 published poems in a small journal edited by friends. I got a job on 42nd Street with Special Reports Incorporated, a series of newsletters that went out to schools and libraries on hot topics. I was put in charge of Special Reports Ecology and the new women's issues, which I manned from the tiny broom closet called my office, from which I could see, once the leaves fell, 2 lions reclining before the public library. That fall, our bestseller, Special Reports The World, was full of news about the Vietnam War. The blood-red oak leaves falling in the park outside my window seemed sad mementos of mounting casualties a world away, and closer in the choices I had made. Each day at noon, I'd race down to the street, past protesters handing out peace buttons and stale leaflets I'd pretend to read. I ate a quick snack, sitting on the steps between the lions, wiped my greasy hands on their stony manes, and, still hungry, I spent my lunch hour in the library, feeding the poet, starving inside me. Bad weather friends. Old friends from my other less successful lives who put up with me. How grateful I am to each of you for how you saved the day when all my days were dark nights of the soul. I must have been one of those sad cases you see on late night movies. 30 plus, insomniac, twice divorced, unsettled, poor, while the writing I used as my excuse for my unhappiness was utter trash. In short, not a pretty picture to watch. And you, whose names I sometimes can't recall, came out of nowhere with buckets and vans to help me move to the next rental, packing my books, my clothes, my manuscripts, storing my overspill in your garages. Some of you even let me stay with you on living room couches, fold-away cots, telling me that old story. Happiness is around the next corner. Heroines were once sad women who got lucky. You were right. At long last, happiness arrived. A steady job, true love, a first novel. By then, you, my bad weather friends, were gone. Like thoughtful fairies in a Shakespeare play, who, having cleaned up after our mistakes, tactfully vanish before the last act. Now, in my own house, sitting at my desk, looking out on a sunny autumn day, I hear a roll call in the wind of thanks. Zora, Jay, Greg, Judy, Marcella, Anne. Sisterhoods. I dream my sisters all gang up on me. They hold a secret meeting and decide to throw me out of the family. A vote, they're quick to point out, is unanimous. stripping me of my rank of sisterhood for faults I'd rather not list, the gist being that I am undeserving, which is true, selfish, stinting, inclined to blurt things out, which now compels me to defend myself, using a phrase I read in a story that goes something like this. We are saved not because we are worthy, but because we are loved. And not just automatically by God, who has to love us, but by kin who don't. And so my sister's rejection is like Adam's expulsion, only worse, as he was promised future redemption. But what redeeming purpose can there be when my own sisters disinherit me? The night of my dream was not a good night. I wanted to call my sisters and find out if any such meeting had taken place behind my back. But it was past the hour when they would welcome phone calls. So I lay in darkness wondering, what becomes of us when we're beyond the pale of human love? How can we earn the love that can't be earned? Or make someone respond the way we want? And lying there, I heard their voices call from deep reserves of love. Have faith, sister. Reunion. We hardly get together anymore now that we're busy with our families. So when my oldest sister calls to ask if she, her husband, son, and new puppy can come to visit, I say, yes, of course. Only you'll have to leave the puppy at home. Blaming my cats and my husband for my no. She bristles at her end when I say so, who once took orders from her. The visit goes downhill from there, she accusing me of being anal, rigid, controlling, her mean shrink talk, which I point out to her. Still, when my sister leaves, I press my hand on her window, and she presses her hand from the middle, from the inside, looking into my eyes, as if we were about to part for life. She to a foreign country where she'll learn new words for the world that we once shared. Years hence, perhaps a great-grandson returns to see the place that meant the world to her. Already in this life, we've strayed away to husbands, puppies, the way she believes guests should be treated versus my theories. If you can call them theories, she retorts. At night, I hear her remaking the bed the way she likes it, the sides not tucked in. And I recall how when we first arrived in this country, she'd yank her blankets loose and reach across the gulf between our beds to hold hands on those nights when I was afraid.
Thank you, Corinne, Helen, Kay. It was such a lively reading, so full of fears and love and reconciliation and so emotional. You know, you brought it all to life, and she's just such a marvelous poet. We have a few minutes left. Why don't we start with Corinne, since she just finished, and then Kay and Helen, and say a little bit about the poetry of the reading, if you would like.
When I finally got settled down in here, it was nice because I really wanted to hear it so much, because it was it's like from the beginning throughout. It's like a whole life. It's a book. It was a novel, and I wondered to myself, what do you call? Is this called something special, like narrative poetry or something? It seems different than other forms of poetry that we've read.
It's a realistic lyricism. You know, every poem is about a page and a half, and it's very intimate. And so she is telling her story. I think there's one where she talks about each time I talk in my poetry, I'm telling you about where I came from. So
Right.
there's a narrative quality in that, but it's also very, it's very emotional too, right? So there's a lyricism in that. And the holding hands, at the end, it brings it all together, even though that's an earlier poem when the two sisters hold hands. So it's like the end of Bicycle Thieves when the father and the son hold hands and bring the whole picture together.
Right. You really get a picture of her sisters lying in the dark and, the difference between them. It's wonderful family saga.
Kay?
Yes, well, I find her delicious. I just love her poetry. I would love to know her. That's how I feel about hearing her work. She's just delicious is a word that I can think of. And all of a sudden a word comes up that it's like a treat hearing her poem and hearing everybody else read it. I was just enchanted by it. Just loved every one of you reading it. And I want to know more about her. I tried to look it up, but I couldn't find an awful lot. So I will continue to find out about her. I loved it. I loved being part of it.
Helen?
Well, yes, I loved listening to all of you. Also, you're just wonderful readers. Julia Alvarez, she was an immigrant, and she was living between two cultures. And she, at the age of 10, due to political situation in the Dominican Republic, her family had to move back to the United States. And there she was, a 10-year-old. And she had to face, as a 10-year-old, a lot of prejudice. And this was the beginnings of what she wanted to express in her poetry was how two different cultures can become one. She even wondered why she was writing in English, but she did indeed say that she always was thinking in Spanish, and I'm sure she was. I'm sure she is a beautiful soul. I did see a picture of her. I looked her up also, and she's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you all for such a marvelous reading. And here's Jennifer Clymer.
Yay.
I'm so honored again to have you all join us. I know there were some technical issues, but we always confront them head on. Now, we can't complete this show until Harry tells us what's happening next week.
Next week, we have two wonderful poets, Kathy Fagan and Ramon Garcia. They're both marvelous poets. So I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you so much, Harry. Oh, Kay, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say what a treat to have Harry read.
Yes, Harry.
Really loved it, Harry.
One thing I wanted to say to you, Kay, your dog is always welcome to it.
He knows when to bark.
I loved hearing you read, Harry.
When do we see you guys back here? Do we have dates for that yet?
The 31st, Bob Beecher asked us to do a reading from the Victorian poets. And so that will be a marvelous reading. Victorian poets is the time Queen Victoria was the queen, in the 19th century.
Great. Wonderful. Looking forward to it. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we will see you later tonight at the theater.